our strengths as women leaders. The national growth in the number of women-owned firms outpaces the number of men-owned businesses in the US, and that's especially true for women of color. As of 2014, nationally, there are nearly 9.1 million women-owned enterprises employing nearly 7.9 million workers and generating over 1.4 trillion in revenues. Shut up. This is great news. This is wonderful news. We should be so proud. We are turning the economic engine at such an increased rate, and it's fantastic and very, very exciting. Get this, I love this. Each day in the US, nearly 1,300 new women-owned businesses are launched every single day. 1,300 of our sisters across the United States are launching their dreams every single day. That's an amazing thing. We're part of that. It's just a wonderful, wonderful time to be a woman in leadership. And we know California is home to the largest number of firms owned by women, accounting for 30% of all business startups. That's great news for us as well. So while it's a great time to be a woman entrepreneur and a woman in leadership, still, as you've probably figured out, there's still much good work to be done to change the equation, not the least of which is in the area of funding. So maybe you've experienced some of this. So we know that VC funding goes mainly to men. In fact, 86% of men are most likely to get their funding from VC, 86%. Whereas women are 37% more likely to self-fund. So a lot more women entrepreneurs are self-funding, family funding, credit card funding, so-called retirement funding today, been there, done that, and not seeking funding from VC, right? Okay, so that's a bit of a concern. That's a concern for me, and so I wanted to look into the reasons for that, and here's what I found. So as women, no surprise, we like to be in control. And so handing over a part of the company to VC doesn't always feel so good. So we would rather just take care of it ourselves and stay out of that kind of arrangement. We're also less likely to put ourselves in front of VC, where we will draw attention to ourselves, our accomplishments, what we're trying to pitch. Sometimes we're a little reticent to toot our own horn. And because of that, we may be missing out on opportunities that could enlarge the scope of the work that we're trying to accomplish. Moreover, women oftentimes do not start businesses that are considered STEM, science, technology, engineering, related to math. Instead, our ideas are more women-centric kinds of ideas, and that causes some concern because VCs are not always familiar with the products and services that are especially targeted at women, and because they are less familiar with those products and services, they may be more reluctant to fund them. So, because of those reasons, we tend to drift back from seeking VC capital. Here's a great quote from The Guardian that I think adds some additional insight on this idea. The Guardian piece said this: a partner at a New York-based VC firm said the following: most venture capitalists haven't internalized the success of female entrepreneurs to a sufficient degree to let it influence their intuitive pattern recognition. That is a lovely way of saying there is second-generation gender bias, right? So VC may not have internalized the fact that women can be very successful, and by virtue of that, they haven't been as open to that. And that's happening inside the corporate world as well as in your world of entrepreneurship. There is a kind of subtle unconscious bias that takes place in our world today. And many of us have bumped up against that. And sometimes it has startled us, and sometimes we've just simply figured out a way to get around it and do a workaround. So let me talk about this just a little bit more, because this is kind of interesting as well. So I did some research with from the organization Catalyst. They do a lot of research about women in leadership. And they did a poll recently of millennial women and men. So millennials are going to take over, many of you are here. You're going to take over in the workforce by the year 2020, which is less than 4 years from now. You're going to be the majority part of the workforce in just under 4 years. So what you think matters to all of us. We're watching and learning from you. My students are millennials, and so I'm learning from them constantly. and they help me grow and develop every single day. So here's what Catalyst found. Women and men revealed that 90% of millennial women agree that there is gender discrimination in the workplace today. 90% of women believe that, whereas 57% of millennial men believe that there's gender discrimination today. Indeed, 78% of millennial women expect that gender discrimination will negatively impact their career trajectory. 78%. That makes me sad, actually. 78% of you think, I'm going to run into some serious gender bias, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do about it. I'll figure it out when I get there. But to know before you're even sort of starting and growing that it's going to be there is a concern for me. Moreover, the Catalyst poll found that men and women have different beliefs about how to solve this discrimination problem. 71% of the men believe if women just try harder, they will find success equal to men. What year is this? 30% of the women agree with that statement. So on this try harder front, right, we've all been told to lean in. We are leaning in. We are leaning in as hard as we can. I can say that for myself. My husband can testify to that. We are leaning in more than we have ever before. So why aren't there more women in senior positions? So I have a hypothesis. I would argue that perhaps not everyone has leaned in. Maybe the idea of the lean in message needs to be expanded to include men. Maybe men need to lean in as well, on behalf of supporting women in leadership. Maybe leaning in as a team endeavor, rather than a solo exercise in futility sometimes, okay? That's something that I'm thinking a lot about. So, this does raise an important question. What's the business case for men stepping up to lean in on behalf of women and their success? So, in the category of business case, we know that the business case for women in leadership is well articulated and very clear. We know that if more women work, the national GDP goes up. In the US, that's 5%. In other parts of the world, it's as high as 27%. There's a positive ripple effect when more women go to work. We also know that when there's more women on boards, companies do better. The New York Times reported just earlier this month, April 2016, that more women on boards results in higher return on sales, better stock growth, and lower risk of insolvency. Also, the Harvard Business Review had a piece on a report, a very large study that was done on senior level women and their impact on companies. And what that study showed is that when there are 30% women at the C level, profitability increases by 15%. I'm not making this up, okay? I'm not making this up. This is the facts. So, when women lead, it's good for everyone. It's good for companies, it's good for people in the company, it's good for entrepreneurs, it's good for the people who interface with you as an entrepreneur. When women lead, everyone wins. So, what to do about this challenge that we have? If the leaning in isn't quite getting us to where we need to be, so what do we need to do? I think it has to do with being able to recruit and be recruited. One of my favorite theorists, Robert Keegan, he writes as a psychologist about leadership, and he had this to say: who comes into a person's life may be the single most important factor of what that life becomes. Who comes into a person's life is a matter of that person's ability to recruit and be recruited by others. This speaks directly to the whole idea of mentorship and sponsorship. So the question is, how good are you at recruiting those who will support you and give you access to resources? And are you someone, if you're in a position to help others, are you enabling yourself to be recruited by others to help them and their success? I think this organization stands very much for those principles. So specifically, I think there's 3 things we can do to move the needle a little bit further. So, first of all, going back to some of the comments I made about VC funding, we need to ask. But we need to ask like a laser. And by that I mean precise, direct, concise, brief, and to the point. Brain and neurological scientists have done a lot of thinking and writing about the differences between the brains of women and men. Guess what? They're different. You knew that. Here's one of the ways that we're different. You already knew this, but I'll give you some language to describe it. So men do tend to think more like a laser, real straight, one thing at a time, right? Sorry, one thing at a time. Women think like radar. We've got a screen, it's in our heads, we see the data points, we know how they connect, and that we're constantly connecting them, so we've got a lot going on. So when we speak sometimes, we tell that whole story of how those dots are connected. Men are better about just getting to the point. So when we ask for resources, assistance, and help, we need to ask like a laser. Then we'll get our message heard a lot more better. A lot more better, that's not good. much more effectively. And by the way, every once in a while that 5-year-old child pops up in me and speaks. And by the way, if more women entrepreneurs will get themselves in front of VC, it will normalize that activity instead of making it rare. So we need to also think about what's my responsibility for other women behind me coming up. The more we're in front of them, the more normal that's going to seem. The second point I want to make is assess. We need to assess our ignorance, both men and women. What don't we know about the other? If we're going to build relationships, if that's our matter of our platform for competitive advantage, how might we assess our ignorance and get to know one another in such a way that we can listen to each other's story? We have to be careful too, in that regard, to not build up barricades of self-defense. Some of us have had some tough experiences in our work life, and sometimes that can leave us a little bit guarded. And so if we're going to move forward, we've got to be able to assess our ignorance, both about ourselves and about those around us. And finally, gaining access with the help of a sponsor or a mentor. So let's talk about that for a second. A sponsor is someone who is going to be your champion, who is going to speak positively about you when you are not there. We all need sponsors. Mentors help us navigate, they give us advice, reassurance, information. Sponsors help open doors. I couldn't be doing what I'm doing right now at Pepperdine University if I did not have sponsors who were speaking about me positively to people very high in my organization that are supporting what I'm doing. Wouldn't have happened without them. And by the way, they're all men. So men can be sponsors for women. I know for sure because it's happened for me on more than one occasion. Also, we need to ask for that kind of help. Now, it's a little hard to ask someone to be your sponsor. Sometimes we never even have that conversation, but if we're positioning ourselves in such a way that our ideas are viable and have some grounding and are data-driven, then I think that we can position ourselves to gain access to resources and knowledge that we wouldn't otherwise have. Okay, so I think also, finally, in terms of gaining access, I feel very powerfully about this. I think that this is a moral obligation for us. This is what's going to change things for us. When women and men see their role as creating access as a duty, as a moral duty, we have a moral obligation to help one another. I know that I take this seriously, and I try to do this as much as I possibly can for young men and young women who are trying to advance their careers. I know that I have access, and I know that it's my moral duty to open up possibilities for those younger people that I stand up for. This is really about the idea that we are all chain linked together. Do you know, we really are not operating as single, solo individuals. We are chain linked together. Let me tell you a quick example of that from the corporate world. I had the great privilege of working with Max Dupree. He's the former CEO of Herman Miller Office Furniture Company. Fantastic company. And when Max was CEO, he took this notion of chain linked together extremely practically and seriously. He tied his salary to the salary of the least paid person in the organization. So when his salary went up, that person's salary went up as well. And if that person's salary went down, so did his. And so everybody in that organization was chain linked together. Everybody, the tide rose equally for all, proportionally speaking, and it rolled out proportionally equal too. That's an unusual set of circumstances, but it speaks volumes. And I think it really does speak to the reality of what is absolutely true in the world. We are chain linked together. All right, so those are some thoughts that I had. I believe that leadership is ours to win. We're living in a time when there's incredible shifts that are playing right into our strengths. And I believe that when women lead, everyone wins. So that means, really, truly, we need to embrace the reality that indeed we are much better together. Thank you so much.